Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining this Zoom call with Elena Casillas-Hoffman with the Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice. And I've known Elena for a year, maybe?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah, just over a year now.
Yeah, well, and it's been very interesting getting to know her and more about what the Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice is doing. And what I wanted to do today is just get an overview. I want to get an overview of what you all do, the size of the organization, the number of people you help, the challenges that you're facing. And we're just slowly getting different bits of information about what's happening in Iowa, and it's hard to keep straight.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that you'll fill us all in on this.
Yeah.
Um, so let's just start with what the Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice is.
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me. My name is Elena Casillas-Hoffman. I am the communications specialist here with the Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice, or Iowa MMJ. I'll probably keep saying that because it's a little bit easier and shorter to use. Iowa MMJ is a statewide serving organization that serves all immigrants and refugees. And we're unique in that we have kind of two main focuses. And that is really our legal department. So it is walking alongside immigrants and refugees as they navigate and move through the really archaic, unjust, and complicated immigration legal system. And we also have our advocacy department. And that is really, again, as in our name, is trying to build a movement for and with all immigrants and refugees throughout the state of Iowa. And so we believe that one, migration is a human right. But we also believe that together we can and will create an Iowa that is more welcoming and inclusive for all. And we only do that when we are all united under this belief and where we all are working together.
Okay, great. And so let's say, how big is your organization? How many do you call everybody a client that you help?
Yeah, so typically under a legal program, we'll use the term clients, but under our advocacy program, we will typically use the term community member, but kind of all encompassing, we would say community members. So if we're going to talk specifically under our legal side, in the past fiscal year, we served almost 3,000 immigrants and refugees through just our legal services alone, and then hundreds, if not thousands more through our advocacy services. And so our advocacy services is often kind of through direct, one-on-one organizing. For us, we really believe that we build a movement by working with individuals all over the state, but individuals that are most directly impacted. So our organizers, our community organizers, will have one-on-ones, they'll have house parties. They will, again, be building kind of movement within community, city, county, et cetera. And so sometimes it's hard to gauge exact numbers, but again, hundreds, if not thousands of individuals that our team is meeting with and working with every single day, every single month, every single year.
And we met, you and I and Erica Johnson. Um, is she the CEO? I forget the exact title, founder and
Yes, Erica Johnson. Erica Johnson is our founding executive director.
executive director. Okay, I should have known that. I
That's
wasn't going to
okay.
bring her up necessarily, but we met maybe a month ago just to talk
Mhm.
about some of the challenges, and let's just get right to this point. I know that you do great work, really important in the community
Thank
throughout
you.
the state.
Thank
And
you.
I was just sort of I was flabbergasted when I learned that 40% of your funding went away. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so so the 40% is we're going to have to reduce our legal services by 40%. So there was some pretty substantial grants that we got that we are now losing in September. And so we wanted to be very honest and transparent with obviously our impacted community members, so those that got those legal services from us, but also just kind of at large. We have been and will continue to be kind of the leading experts on immigration here in Iowa, and we pride ourselves in being able to support community members that are walking through the immigration legal process. But because of politically, motivated factors, we have lost some very substantial grants, or are going to lose, and those cuts are going to take into effect in September. So when we say that we've served almost 3,000 immigrants and refugees through our legal services, a 40% cut means that over 1,000 immigrants and refugees are no longer going to be able to access legal services through us. That also means that we've had to reduce the legal staff that we have by 8 individuals. So 8 individuals are no longer going to be employed under us through our legal department. I think it's important to say, though, that that doesn't mean that we are not continuing legal services. And so, for instance, one of the grants that we got allowed us to specifically support individuals that were becoming naturalized citizens, so individuals who could apply for citizenship. That doesn't mean that we are cutting that service completely. It just means that the amount of individuals that we are able to support in that process is going to be dramatically reduced. Another avenue of funding that we got, especially from the federal government, was in and around supporting Ukrainians and Afghans. And one of the things that I think I've kind of started to hear is individuals saying, wow, well, a lot of the Afghan community here in Iowa maybe have gotten their green cards or have moved through that legal process. So the funding may or may not affect them as much. Again, we are still going to continue to support Ukrainians and Afghans here in Iowa. But I think it's important to understand that just because, an individual might move to a quote unquote safer or more permanent legal status does not mean, one, that they are completely safe. We have seen across the country how individuals that have green cards can have those pulled from them, and also that it doesn't mean that they're not safe from ICE pulling them over and from ICE being aggressive and being aggressive, using aggressive tactics against them, including, as we've unfortunately seen, especially within these past 2 weeks, is ICE using lethal methods against community members. So just because you have moved potentially to a safe, quote unquote, safer immigration status or a more permanent one, does not mean that you are a common thing we hear is does not mean that fear goes away. That fear is absolutely still present. And the other important thing I want to mention, because I think especially for our Afghan community, it bears saying, um, many of the men that we've been able to support are still looking to bring their wives and their daughters and their sons here to the United States. And so a very common theme that we will hear from Afghan men who maybe have a green card or who have moved through citizenship is they are desperate to bring the women in their family over and to provide them safety and to provide them an education. I'm thinking specifically of one Afghan father that I talked to a couple months ago, very one-on-one, who told me he is anxiously waiting every day to be able to have his daughter access education again. She's almost 3 years now of not being in school, and all he wants is to bring his daughter to the United States so she can come back to school, so that she can learn, she can thrive, she can, have the freedoms that are afforded to us when we have access to education. So again, for many, obviously moving to a status is safer and affords them different opportunities. And yes, we are happy and will continue to work with those individuals. But that does not mean that just because they have access to status that their story or their family story is over.
Well, and many of these men, they're here and they're being betrayed by us,
Yeah.
by our government. They
Yeah.
worked with our soldiers,
Yeah.
in Afghanistan. They helped us.
Yep.
They helped the United States, and they were
Yep.
promised safety and their families being able to come here. This was a promise that we made that
Absolutely.
was broken.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one that we shouldn't forget because our families haven't forgotten. And again, I think I want to go back to this notion of for many of the individuals that we talk to, our Afghan community and just our immigrant and refugee community at large, the number one things that we hear from them right now is how deeply terrified they are, how deeply terrified they are to maintain their status, to protect their family. They are deeply terrified by the very real threat of ICE throughout Iowa. And they're seeking safety. They're seeking safety and opportunity, and that is something I think so many of us can understand. That idea of what would I do to protect my family? What would I do to support my family? And how do I feel seeking safety for them when I was promised it by the government? I supported the US government, for years. Sometimes we have individuals that have supported the US government for decades in Afghanistan. And I was promised safety for myself and for my family, for my wife and for my daughter. And that promise is not being upheld. And I am waiting years and years, and for some with real no ending in sight. And that promise is one that we made and we should uphold.
And for some reason, most of the American people don't care, or I like to think they're ignorant about it. But a
I
lot of,
think, I think, yeah, I think it's when we talk about immigration, especially the immigration legal process, there's definitely these kind of preconceived notions at times that there's two ways to do immigration. There is the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. And the reality is that our immigration system is wholly complex. Immigration law, I talk to our lawyers, will often say that immigration law is one of the hardest areas of law to study and to focus in. And right now, under the Trump administration, with over 700 policy actions on immigration alone, that law is changing every day. Those policies and those parameters change every single day. In the first 100 days of the second Trump administration, there was over 200 policy actions. So that was two per day that our legal team was trying to constantly stay up to date. That's insane. That is so many policy actions. That is so many things to keep track of for so many different statuses, for so many individuals of so many different backgrounds, trying to, continue to explain and have individuals understand what this process is and how it's impacting them. It's time consuming and it is extremely, extremely difficult. So the reality, and I want individuals to really deeply understand that there is not two ways to do immigration. There's a multitude of ways to do immigration. And our fundamental belief is that migration is a human right, that all individuals deserve to seek safety for themselves and for their families. And that for many of our communities who, I want to say intentionally choose Iowa, they choose it because they have heard and they seek the safety and the calmness and the quiet kind of rural life that so many Iowans hold dear and understand intrinsically. So immigration is complex. There's not one way or two ways to do it. There is many. And the system as it exists continues to get more complicated and more unjust for many of our community members.
Well, and it's all on purpose.
Yeah.
They want to stop it.
Yes.
They want to make it as difficult as possible.
Yes.
And so they want to make people, they want to make it impossible to serve them.
Yep.
They want them to leave, despite the fact that we really need workers and the skills that people provide.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to get myself not to say that the policy is inherently racist. I was trying not to do that. But then all of a sudden, the images of white South Africans getting on the fast track just
Yeah.
popped into my mind. And so
Yeah.
it's clear that I don't have to try to self-censor myself on the racism accusation. I mean,
Yeah.
but because it is. And we just need to be true, just speak the truth about it. And so
Yeah.
they want the system, and they pulled away 40% of your funding. So everything that they're doing, throwing at your organization and at the immigrants, documented and undocumented, is purposefully making the system not work, be too complicated, and even having a green card doesn't mean anything more anymore. It's not a promise.
Yeah.
Going up and doing the right thing and showing up for your scheduled appointments, which is a kind of a contract that you do this and then we'll see, then your path is this. That's also a broken promise.
Yeah.
America is nothing but a bunch of broken promises to people coming here from all over the world to contribute. Am I?
Yeah. Well, I think we saw that. What did the Trump administration campaign on? They campaigned on mass deportations.
Yeah.
That was their campaign and their campaign promise. And we have seen that, including here in Iowa. I want to be very real. The threat of ICE is real in Iowa. ICE is detaining people from Iowa. ICE is deporting people from Iowa. And ICE is deporting people from Iowa to third countries. So that threat is very real. And this mass deportation goal, I think originally we heard about 3,000 a day was the goal. It's starting to somewhat become actualized. I think I saw a report recently that talked about it was around 1,500 deportations a day. This is happening to our communities. This is what the Trump administration ran on. And they originally might have said, oh, we're going after a certain type of immigrant. But there's every status that is getting attacked. We have just recently with Supreme Court decision know that TPS holders are next kind of in line of losing their status. So not only is it a mass deportation agenda, but is a mass delegalization agenda as well. So for individuals that are moving through the immigration legal process that are, like you said, going to check-ins, are walking through the different pathways that exist. Not every pathway, of course, leading to citizenship, but hopefully a pathway that is leading to some sense of stability and some sense of legal status. Those are being ripped out from underneath people as well. So every status is being attacked. And if individuals are not finding that their statuses are ripped out from underneath them, they're finding that the protections and the parameters around them are absolutely being constrained. So again, TPS is one that is being pulled out from underneath people. If we talk about kind of the travel ban right now, that's deeply affecting a lot of our clients. So again, going back to some fathers that are trying to be reunited with wives and with children, they're unable to because of the travel ban being into effect and how these different policies again impact our community members. So these are all policies that are being put forward by the Trump administration to reach their campaign promise of mass deportations.
And TPS, temporary protected status.
Yes, temporary protected status. And so we have individuals across Iowa. I'm thinking kind of off the top of my head, a big community, at least here in central Iowa, is Salvadorians. Salvadorians have been in Iowa for quite some time, but that's because temporary protected status is for individuals who are unable to return to their countries of origin due to war, conflict, natural disaster, deep unsafety, and really just kind of continued economic instability. So these, for some TPS holders here in Iowa, have gotten married, have, maybe had children, have bought houses, have really adapted to Iowa and have integrated themselves in their lives here in Iowa. And are now finding that their legal status and their legal protections are being ripped out from underneath them, are now going to face the very real reality of becoming undocumented. Not because they chose to be undocumented and not because, that was maybe how they came to Iowa, but because the government is effectively making them undocumented. And once obviously they face that reality, also then the second real reality for all of our communities, but especially for those that are undocumented, is then the threat of ICE and ICE's deportation from Iowa. So yeah, it's we have many individuals in Iowa who have TPS that are terrified um, of what comes next.
Well, when Trump started talking, before he even took office, he was talking about mass deportations. And I wrote a piece for the Gazette called Document the Atrocities, because I knew that there would be atrocities. You're not going
Hmm.
to do that. And so we've
Hmm.
seen the atrocities, and people have been documenting them. And that's,
Hmm.
not because they read anything I wrote, but it's just sort of a natural thing to do. But we
Yeah,
have to document the atrocities.
yeah.
And so with an increased, and so I looked at, I did the math on what happens, as you increase interactions between the community and police.
Hmm.
Okay. And so this is just regular police, not
Hmm.
the untrained, people that are ICE,
Hmm.
agents now, many of them, the masked,
Yeah.
untrained, Proud Boys or whatever they are, whatever, white nationalist groups some of them go to,
Hmm.
that before just our regular police, that whenever there's an interaction, about 2% of the time, this is the entire population, about 2% of the time, there's either the threat of force or actual force. 2%.
Hmm.
If you're dealing with a minority, that can double, triple, quadruple.
Hmm.
Okay. So the fact of the matter, increasing ICE presence on the streets leads to more violent interactions as a function of their being there.
Hmm.
And so we had to expect it. It was going to happen.
Hmm.
And the more untrained people that we have, or not trained well enough, there's going to be more violence. The
Yeah.
community is, we are not made safer by ICE agents on the streets.
Yeah. The reality is, we can look at the news. The reality is that ICE kills. ICE murders people in the street. That's a fact. That is a fact. We also know that our safest communities are the ones that have the most resources and not the ones that are over-policed. We know that masked ICE agents driving in unmarked cars, which is happening here in Iowa, further harms communities' trust with local law enforcement. It further prevents individuals from reporting crimes. It further prevents individuals seeking safety from potentially abusive relationships and scenarios. All of this is long documented. And what we're continuing to hear now with the continued presence of masked men in the streets with weapons and unmarked cars is that it is deeply confusing to community members to tell who is local police, ICE. And so it becomes a point where you almost lump them all together. Who is safe for me to go to when I witness a crime? Who is safe for me to go to when I am fleeing an abusive and a scary scenario if I cannot tell who is who anymore? So it is leading to a reduction in individuals reporting crime. It is leading to a reduction of community trust and safety. And that is not, again, like isolated to one community. It is what we continue to see and hear from across the state of Iowa. And it's making all of us less safe. ICE makes all of us less safe. ICE kills people. These are facts, and we will continue to see that until real, meaningful actions are taken by elected officials.
One of the ways that I think people process this that sort of drives me nuts, and I've written a lot about this is all seen at one level by people. These are policies.
Hmm.
And they don't think about the consequences of the policies.
Yeah.
Changes in SNAP benefits are
Yeah.
policies.
Yeah.
They don't see them as in terms of the consequences. And the consequences that I like to frame this in is this is all of this. It's not about policy. We can't it's not we can't reduce it just as policy differences across the parties. No, it's structural violence,
Hmm.
state
Hmm.
supported structural violence
Yeah.
against people,
Yeah.
against humanity.
Yeah.
And this is our government doing it, and we are
Yeah.
accepting if we don't express our dissatisfaction and demand that it be stopped, we are complicit.
Yeah. I mean, let's look at Iowa's elected leaders at the federal level. Every single one of them voted to give almost $250 billion to the deportation pipeline. That is our taxes. What are our taxes going to at a time when individuals are unable to afford groceries? We just talked about SNAP benefits, that refugees no longer qualify for SNAP benefits. And so families that were trying to feed themselves are no longer able to because our government has decided who is and is not worthy of food, period. Uh, these are real structural things. And the reality for all of our communities is that they know that these are not policies. These are their lived experiences. These are their lives. These are things that directly impact them. So, yes, we could talk about what these policies mean, but I agree. It is very, very important to remember that policies are actions. They are actions and they are decisions that our elected leaders make on our behalf of how to support or not support our communities. So when all of Iowa's elected leaders vote in support of giving $250 billion to the deportation pipeline, including the deportation pipeline here from Iowa, that is an active decision on where our money should go and how we want to lead. Do we want to lead with cruelty or do we want to lead with compassion? Do Iowans know what makes our community safer? Of course. We know that immigrants and refugees are fundamental to the state of Iowa. They are important for our future. They help our state thrive. The only reason our state continues to see a population growth is because of immigrants and refugees. And the only reason that some rural communities are not dying off or are completely going away is because of immigrants and refugees that are moving in. The reason that some schools are not consolidating, but rather expanding, is because of immigrant and refugee communities that are coming in. Immigrant and refugees contribute in 1 year in 2023 alone over $700 million in state and local taxes. These are all fundamental things that help our state thrive. And all of us can understand what makes our community safer. And it is not masked men in unmarked cars patrolling our streets, creating fear and uncertainty and a deep level of unsafety for all of us. masked men and guns are killing people in the streets.
And given all the economics of it and the need, and I hate to keep coming back, to racism is the reason, but racism is the reason because we should, denying SNAP benefits, not supporting immigrants and refugees. Conservatives, well, they're not conservatives anymore. There's nothing conservative about MAGA, but helping people come here and contribute and educating them. Republicans will say, well, how are we going to pay for that? Easy. It's an investment. It's
Hmm.
not a cost. It's an investment that will yield returns over and over and over again, many, many dollars back from the investment
Yeah.
than from the cost. So that
Yeah.
so that means you know that given that they're not wanting that economic and cultural benefits that come means that they don't want that investment. They're
Yeah.
they're denying it. They don't want it. It's not important to them. The logic doesn't matter when the only thing in your head you have is hate and
Yeah.
racism.
Well, I also think Common Sense Institute put out a really great report, I believe it was earlier this year, that talked about the state demographics and population, but also how all of that ties to our financial future. I believe it was in 1 year, 4,000 college educated young people left the state of Iowa. Iowa is one of the worst in the country for the brain drain. We have young people fleeing, not just leaving, fleeing this state. And with it is a large investment, like you said, into Iowa's financial future. Immigrant and refugee families are coming to communities and are helping rural Iowa thrive. They are building homes, they are buying homes, they are starting new businesses. 10% of Main Street businesses across Iowa, especially in rural communities, are started and founded by immigrants and refugees. They are putting their kids in schools. Iowa prides ourselves in our long history of good education. It's hopefully something we could return to be prideful of. Um, all of this contributes to, obviously, we could talk about economic, 1 in 4 physicians in Iowa is an immigrant. These are all things that, yes, the financial reality of immigrant refugee communities are essential to Iowa, but also the cultural. Our immigrant refugee community families are coming to Iowa and are staying here for generations. They are intentionally moving to the state to build full and vibrant lives for themselves, for their children, and for their children's children. That's important at a time when we know that so many young people are fleeing Iowa. And the reality is that the history of Iowa is one of immigration. And many people that I talk to talk about this beautiful history of immigration in Iowa, and specifically thinking about under Governor Ray, this idea that what did it look like when bipartisan support here in Iowa meant for welcoming immigrants and refugees? What did that mean for the state? We saw how immigrants and refugees contributed to the state of Iowa. That's not a new thing. That's an important integral part of who Iowa is. And so, if we want to be very real about what the future of Iowa is, if we want to be very real about who's moving to Iowa and who's helping the long-term sustainable future of Iowa, it is immigrants and refugees. And that at this point should be that is a fact. And we need our politicians to jump onto that fact.
Well, and to, help make your point, I remember a couple of years ago, I was looking at the top merit scholars, the kids that did the very best, and looking at and the register had a story on them and looking at that, 7 or 8 of the kids, based upon their names, I concluded that they were, their parents were recent immigrants.
Hmm.
I mean, from a variety of different countries. And so
Yeah.
that just makes your point that they'll do this. Here, I need to back up just a little bit and say I'm
Yeah.
not saying every Republican is racist. I'm saying that the policies of the Trump administration are racist, and all we have to do is look to his main advisor, Stephen Miller. to know his racism. So I'm not calling every Republican, and I'm also saying that they're fundamentally misled by MAGA media.
Hmm.
They're fundamentally, I listen to WHO radio every day. I watch Fox News every day. And much to my surprise, I'm forgetting who it was, but you'll remember the terrible deportations, although most of us have forgotten those terrible deportations to the El Salvadorian prisons
Hmm. Hmm.
by people that weren't there. And do you remember the name of the president of El Salvador?
Bukele, I believe.
Well, yeah, he's just a horrible, horrible man. And on WHO radio, the main radio station in Des Moines, they were celebrating him as a hero.
Hmm.
And so our MAGA friends, whatever, they're consuming these lies. They're consuming this propaganda that makes them hate when that isn't their natural state. I don't believe that for a second.
Well, I really do believe that the Trump administration and potentially, MAGA as a whole, offered individuals somebody to blame. And it's not a new trope to blame immigrants. That's not, unique to right now or quite frankly, even the history of the United States, let alone, the history of many countries and governments. But at a time when a widening gap between the working class and the richest of the rich and all of the billionaires, one of my favorite terms at times is calling them the broligarchs, because it is. It's just this really insane kind of brotherhood of rich billionaires that are putting forward and their influence into our politics. Who do we blame? Individuals that are continuing to consolidate their power and their wealth at the top, 1% of 1% of the billionaire class? Or is it immigrants and refugees who are coming to this country seeking safety and opportunity, and for many, truly starting over, and at times starting over with little to nothing? Who do we blame for your inability to pay for your groceries? Who do we blame for your inability to buy a house in your 20s for your new family? Who do we blame for, rising prices in our healthcare and our most basic needs? Is it immigrants and refugees who understand and who face those very same challenges that you do? Or is it this consolidated group of power that is overwhelmingly showing a vast influence into our policies? I do also want to add, because I think it's important to say that here in Iowa, what we continue to see is some of the most anti-immigrant bills and legislation being pushed forward with bipartisan support. So we are here in Iowa, we are not seeing, one party standing up for our most vulnerable communities right now. We are seeing both parties push forward some of the most anti-immigrant policies and bills and actions. I'm thinking specifically to SF 2340. For those of you who may not know, SF 2340, the ACLU of Iowa labeled it as the most anti-immigrant legislation that Iowa has ever seen. That was passed with bipartisan support, including bipartisan support of individuals that are running for some high office here in the state of Iowa right now. With our lovely lawyers at the ACLU of Iowa, and also the American Immigration Council, have currently joined that, and we will continue to fight that legislation. So it is not taken into effect because of our lawsuit. Again, this is passed with bipartisan support here in Iowa, and I think it's important to mention that because what does it mean when our politicians do not stand up for our most vulnerable communities? What does it mean when it is potentially not quote unquote politically advantageous for them to stand up for individuals who are deeply suffering right now? And we can go back to, again, like we talked about, who are the financial and cultural and sustainable future of Iowa? Of course. But what does it mean when bipartisan support is directly attacking our most vulnerable communities? Who else is vulnerable right now? And to what means do we think that the current administration is going to stop at denying refugees SNAP benefits? Do we think that they're going to stop there? Or do we think they're going to start expanding and blocking other individuals' access to SNAP benefits? So I think it says a lot about those in elected office when they kind of sign on and support for these anti-immigrant bills and policies, because to me, it signals if you are not able to stand up for the most directly impacted and the most vulnerable communities right now, why would I think that you would stand up for me as well?
Wow, great point. I just want to say a couple of things, mainly about a different kind of violence that people don't think about as
Yeah.
violence, and then also about history. Every border, when it's put in place, is an act of violence.
Mm.
It separates people.
Hmm.
Every border, every border. In the Middle East, here, when the southern border was just dropped down on New Mexico, California, Arizona, and Texas. When that was dropped down, that separated families. That has
Hmm.
generational effects.
Hmm.
If you look at, well, when there used to be phone books, you could look at the phone book in Santa Fe and in Ascension in Mexico, and you'd see the
Yeah.
same names.
I do want to say you're dating yourself a bit with the phone book
Phone
reference.
books, that's right. Everything I do dates myself. But so we need to think about them as acts of violence all around the world. Historically, now they seem like they were there forever. No, and there's generational trauma and consequences economically, whatever.
100%. Yeah.
The other thing is those people don't want to accept responsibility for history, and I sort of understand it. But we need to recognize it. No, I don't understand it. Just admit it. It's just like Western civilizations marched around the world extracting resources under a capitalist system with
Hmm.
little or no concerns for the natural environment or the humans that were there. There's no consideration. They milked those places dry with no consideration of the human or environmental consequences. They
Yeah.
marched on and they called it progress and civilization. And in its wake were countries that their resources had been taken away. The
Yeah.
people that used to be able to, farm and, live their lives, they're just, their whole economies were destroyed.
Yeah.
And and yet we act like and now with climate refugees, I mean, what are there? A couple of
Huge.
million climate refugees,
Yeah.
and while the Western countries, built on coal and oil and the resources of those other nations, there are consequences, and they're coming home to roost now.
Yeah.
And we need to recognize that those people coming over that looking for safety and sanctuary and a good life
Mhm.
are may well be only doing that because of the damage our country has done to those other countries.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
so
I
share
think
your thoughts.
I absolutely agree because I think we talk to so many. I'm thinking of a sticker that we have that says migration is an act of love that we pass out at certain events. It is an act of love. You know, seeking migration is often for safety and opportunity, for again, for an individual and their family. But the act of migration is often because of compounding factors that are pushing people from their communities. So many of us, like staying in the community you were born in is becoming a more and more rare thing. So many of us, moved from where we were originally born. Maybe we've moved, here in the United States, moved from state to state. I've moved from state to state, from community to community, and even within a state. Maybe you lived in the eastern part of Iowa, and now you live in the western, or maybe you lived kind of in a rural part of Iowa, and now you're here in Polk County or in Des Moines at whole. A lot of us kind of can some way understand this idea of moving and moving for what? Moving for opportunity, moving for a new adventure or whatnot. The reality for many of our immigrants, or what many of our immigrants and refugees know, is that they are pushed out of their communities. They are pushed out of their countries. And like you said, sometimes it is a kind of recent thing. I think sometimes we look at climate refugees as a maybe more newer concept, a burgeoning population, of course, but that's a kind of newer form of migration for some. But it is often not something that just happens quickly. like war and unrest is usually, we can trace a whole history. We can trace back to colonization. I'm thinking for some of our Congolese community members. That is not just, oh, in the past couple of years, things have become unsafe for me. It is compounding 10, decades, hundreds of years plus of deep instability and safety concerns for themselves and their families. So yes, individuals are migrating, are moving here to Iowa, here to the United States as a whole. But for many, that is because they've been left with little to no other choice. They are fleeing violence and unrest that is often compounded into a whole history that is pushing them out from their communities. Immigration is hard. Like starting over in a new community, in a new language, in a new culture, in a new land. I think here in Iowa, with all of the cornfields, like that's a whole new thing for some individuals who maybe came from more mountainous regions or came from close to the coast of their country. It is very difficult, and it is not a decision that people make lightly. It takes a hell of a lot of strength, physical, mental, and emotional, to immigrate and to migrate, to start over for yourself and for your family. And it is not one that people take lightly. And so, yes, I agree with everything you said. And I think I think also why it is imperative that we have such understanding and compassion, because what would we do if a war broke out here in Iowa? What would we have to do for ourselves and for the safety of our family if a natural disaster completely ransacked our state and made it uninhabitable? Like, what would we do then for ourselves and for our family? And yes, sometimes it takes putting ourselves in people's shoes to have that empathy. But I also don't think we always should have to put ourselves in other people's shoes to have empathy. We should just know that migration deeply is a deep and complicated choice that many people are making, and often one born out of fear, and for individuals that are, again, seeking safety and refuge.
Thank you. Is there anything we can do to help?
Yeah, I think at this moment, we've gotten that question a lot of times, and maybe I'm just thinking because it is an election season, and I was just kind of reading what some candidates were saying recently. Um, we've talked about how policies are real lived experiences for people. This is a moment while individuals are on the campaign trail and are running to represent us and represent all Iowans, to ask individuals running for office, what is your stance on immigration? What is your stance on ICE being in our community? For individuals that have maybe held office, that have voted in support of $250 billion to the deportation pipeline. Why did you do that? How is that making my ability to afford my groceries, to afford, putting gas in my car any easier? Thinking for other individuals maybe who don't currently hold office, and kind of one of these things I've started to hear a bit more, this talking point is promising, if I were to be elected, I would put real kind of parameters around ICE. ICE killing people is not new. ICE, harming communities is not new. And it's not new to Iowa. Iowa has had ICE for well before the second Trump administration. ICE has been ransacking and ripping apart families here in Iowa. What are the real steps that you're going to put into place if you were to hold elected office and represent me and my community, to protect the future of Iowa, to protect all individuals that call Iowa home? We also just recently put out a report. You can find that on our website, that talks about what ICE looks like here in Iowa, and specifically kind of looking at within the first year of the Trump administration, the second term, and pulling what some of that data shows. And the data shows really concretely that ICE is often going after a specific type of individual. Predominantly, the average age is 34, Latino man. That seems to be this really kind of largest group when it comes to what ICE detainment here in Iowa looks like. And also what the report has found, that ICE is able to be effective here in Iowa through local collaboration. So, 8 county jails are currently detaining for ICE for over 72 hours. Talk to your local sheriff, talk to your local police department. Use our report and use the data set before you to ask questions about how is ICE able to be as effective as it is here in Iowa, and what are the ways that our community can help protect all individuals and protect all of our communities that are seeking safety and really just, the freedom to thrive here in Iowa. And I'll also mention, Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice is a nonprofit. We are always looking for allies to be united with us in this cause. If you're wanting to volunteer, if you're wanting to donate, if you're wanting to really kind of concretely get involved, go to our website. We have links for everything. And really remember that I think as I said before, how we stand up and speak for our most vulnerable communities right now is absolutely a reflection of us and our values. And how do we want to lead? Do we want to accept what has been happening, or do we want to start leading with compassion and understanding as opposed to cruelty? These policies and its impact in our communities are absolutely a reflection of us as Iowans, of us as Americans. Um, and do we accept that or do we not accept that? And how do we want to be remembered in this moment? By standing for our most vulnerable communities or by accepting um, the continued attacks against them?
Well, that will close. Thank you so much for your important work.
Yes,
Um,
thank you for the time to chat, and I appreciate your questions and I appreciate your support for our communities right now. It is conversations like this that we hope sheds light to what all of our communities are facing.
well, thank you.
Thank you.